Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. The Prestige 2006 Movie Review. The Prestige is a 2006 science fiction psychological thriller film directed by Christopher Nolan, who co-wrote the screenplay with his brother Jonathan Nolan, based on the 1995 novel by Christopher Priest. Set in Victorian London, the film stars Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale as stage magicians who compete to create a superior teleportation illusion. The supporting cast includes Michael Caine, Scarlett Johansson, Rebecca Hall, Andy Serkis, and David Bowie as inventor Nikola Tesla. The film reunited Nolan with Bale and Caine following Batman Begins, 2005, and with several regular collaborators, including cinematographer Wally Pfister, production designer Nathan Crowley, editor Lee Smith, and composer David Julian. Principal photography took place in early 2006, with locations including Los Angeles and Colorado. The Prestige premiered at the El Capitan Theater on October 17, 2006, and was released in the United States on October 20, 2006, by Buena Vista Pictures Distribution through its Touchstone Pictures label, with Warner Brothers Pictures handling international distribution. The film received generally positive reviews from critics, with particular praise for its performances, production design, and narrative structure. It was a box office success, earning $109 million worldwide on the budget of $40 million. Note, though the movie contains multiple flash-forwards and flashbacks throughout, the story is told here in chronological order. In 1890s London, Robert Angier, Alfred Borden, and Angier's wife, Julia, work as magician's assistants under the mentorship of John Cutter. During a water tank trick, Julia drowns after Borden incorrectly ties her wrists. Angier blames Borden, and the two men become bitter rivals. Both men pursue separate careers in magic. Borden, a gifted inventor of illusions, marries a woman named Sarah, with whom he has a daughter named Jess, and hires an enigmatic assistant, Fallon. Angier, whose strength lies more in showmanship, continues working with Cutter and takes on a new assistant, Olivia. The feud escalates as Angier and Borden visit and sabotage each other's acts. Borden loses two fingers after being shot by Angier during a pistol trick, and Borden violently thwarts Angier's bird act in front of a live audience, harming an attendee. Borden next debuts a spectacular illusion, the Transported Man, in which he appears to teleport from one side of the stage to the other almost instantly. Angier becomes obsessed with discovering the trick's secret and, with Cutter's help, roughly recreates the act using a lookalike named Root, a failed actor. Though Angier's version is successful, he resents remaining hidden beneath the stage while Root takes the applause. Desperate to outdo Borden, he sends Olivia to spy on him, but she falls in love with Borden and defects, and passes Borden's coded diary to Angier. Borden reveals to Angier that the keyword, Tesla, supposedly decrypts the diary and reveals his method. Seeking answers, Angier travels to Colorado Springs to meet the inventor Nikola Tesla. Believing Tesla built a teleportation device for Borden, Angier commissions Tesla to make one. Tesla eventually delivers a working machine but warns that it will bring only misery. When used, the device creates a duplicate of its subject while leaving the original person intact. In London, Angier uses the machine in a new illusion, the real Transported Man, which earns him acclaim. Sarah, suspicious of Borden's secrecy and affair with Olivia, hangs herself. Determined to uncover Angier's method, Borden sneaks backstage during a performance of The Real Transported Man and witnesses Angier fall into a water tank and drown. He attempts to open the tank and save Angier, but is arrested for Angier's murder, convicted, and sentenced to death. While awaiting execution, Borden is approached by a solicitor for a wealthy lord called Lowe, who offers to care for Borden's daughter Jess in exchange for the secret behind the original Transported Man. When Caldlow visits the prison, Borden is horrified to discover that he is actually Angier. Borden passes Angier a note revealing the secret, but Angier tears it up, leaving him to hang. Cutter helps dispose of Tesla's teleportation machine, but is dismayed by Angier's intention of allowing Borden to die. As Borden is hanged, a disguised visitor shoots Angier in the basement of his theater, revealing himself as Borden. The mortally wounded Angier learns the truth: Borden is in fact a pair of identical twins sharing one identity. One twin loved Sarah, the other Olivia. One lost 2 fingers, and amputated the twins' same 2 fingers to match. One has survived, while the other was executed. Together, they performed the transported man by switching places undetected, and whenever one twin was performing, the other hid using prosthetics and makeup under the identity Fallon. Dying, Angier confesses that each time he used Tesla's machine, it created a clone, one of whom drowned beneath the stage each night, and that he is no longer sure of his own identity. The surviving Borden brother reclaims his daughter, as Cutter narrates that the final act of any magic trick, The Prestige, is the return of what was thought lost. Angier's death knocks over a kerosene lamp that sends his theater up in flames, revealing rows of water tanks holding the corpses of his many duplicates. Julian Geralds and Sam Mendes, producer, approached Christopher Priest for an adaptation of his novel The Prestige. Priest was impressed with Christopher Nolan's films following and Memento, and subsequently, producer Valerie Dean brought the book to Nolan's attention. In October 2000, Nolan traveled to the United Kingdom to publicize Memento, as Newmarket Films was having difficulty finding a United States distributor. While in London, Nolan read Priest's book and shared the story with his brother Jonathan while walking around in Highgate, a location later featured in the scene where Angier ransoms Borden's stage engineer in Highgate Cemetery. The development process for The Prestige began as a reversal of their earlier collaboration. Jonathan Nolan had pitched his initial story for Memento to his brother during a road trip. A year later, the option on the book became available and was purchased by Aaron Ryder of Newmarket Films. In late 2001, Nolan became busy with the post-production of Insomnia, and asked his brother to help work on the script. The writing process was a long collaboration between the Nolan brothers, occurring intermittently over a period of 5 years. In the script, the Nolans emphasized the magic of the story through the dramatic narrative, playing down the visual depiction of stage magic. The 3-act screenplay was deliberately structured around the 3 elements of the film's illusion: the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. It took a long time to figure out how to achieve cinematic versions of the very literary devices that drive the intrigue of the story, Christopher Nolan told Variety. The shifting points of view, the idea of journals within journals and stories within stories. Finding the cinematic equivalents of those literary devices was very complex. Although the film is thematically faithful to the novel, 2 major changes were made to the plot structure during the adaptation process. The novel's spiritualism subplot was removed, and the modern-day frame story was replaced with Borden's wait for the gallows. Priest approved of the adaptation, describing it as an extraordinary and brilliant script, a fascinating adaptation of my novel. In early 2003, Nolan planned to direct the film before the production of Batman Begins accelerated. Following the release of Batman Begins, Nolan started up the project again, negotiating with Jackman and Bale in October 2005. Josh Hartnett pitched Nolan for a role. While the screenplay was still being written, production designer Nathan Crowley began the set design process in Nolan's garage, employing a visual script consisting of scale models, images, drawings, and notes. Jonathan and Christopher Nolan finished the final shooting draft on January 13, 2006, and began production 3 days later on January 16. Filming ended on April 9. Crowley and his crew searched Los Angeles for almost 70 locations that resembled fin de siècle London. Jonathan Nolan visited Colorado Springs to research Nikola Tesla and based the electric bulb scene on actual experiments Tesla conducted. Nathan Crowley helped design the scene for Tesla's invention. It was shot in the parking lot of the Mount Wilson Observatory. Influenced by a Victorian modernist aesthetic, Crowley chose 4 locations in the Broadway Theater District in downtown Los Angeles for the film's stage magic performances: the Los Angeles Theater, the Palace Theater, the Los Angeles Belasco, and the Tower Theatre. Crowley also turned a portion of the Universal backlot into Victorian London. Osgood Castle in Colorado was also used as a location. Nolan built only one set for the film, and under the stage section that houses the machinery that makes the larger illusions work, preferring to simply dress various Los Angeles locations and sound stages to stand in for Colorado and Victorian England. In contrast to most period pieces, Nolan kept up the quick pace of production by shooting with handheld cameras, and refrained from using artificial lighting in some scenes, relying instead on natural light on location. Costume designer Joan Bergen chose attractive, modern Victorian fashions for Scarlett Johansson. Cinematographer Wally Pfister captured the mood with soft earth tones as white and black colors provided background contrasts, bringing actors' faces to the foreground. Editing, scoring, and mixing finished on September 22, 2006. The Prestige technically contains what is the first IMAX 70mm film camera shot used in a narrative feature-length film. A visual effect shot featuring Christian Bale's duplicated character was filmed using IMAX cameras so Nolan could test if IMAX footage could be both reduced to 35mm movie film for wide release, as well as be used in effects sequences, as Nolan planned to use the format for his upcoming film The Dark Knight. The film's score was written by English musician and composer David Julian. Julian had previously collaborated with director Christopher Nolan on following 1998, Memento, 2000, and Insomnia, 2002. Following the film's narrative, the soundtrack has three sections: The Pledge, The Turn, and The Prestige. The song Analyze by Radiohead frontman Tom York is played over the credits. Returner by Gact was used as the theme song in the Japanese version. The rivalry between Angier and Borden dominates the film. Obsession, secrecy, and sacrifice fuel the battle, as both magicians contribute their fair share to a deadly duel of one-upmanship, with disastrous results. Angier's obsession with beating Borden costs him Cutter's friendship while providing him with a collection of his own dead clones. Borden's obsession with maintaining the secrecy of his twin leads Sarah to question their relationship, eventually resulting in her suicide when she suspects the truth. Angier and one of the twins both lose Olivia's love because of their inhumanity. Finally, Borden is hanged and the last copy of Angier shot. Their struggle is also expressed through class warfare, Borden as the professor, a working-class magician who gets his hands dirty, versus Angier as the great Danton, a classy, elitist showman whose accent makes him appear American. Film critic Matt Brunson claimed that a complex theme of duality is exemplified by Angier and Borden, that the film chooses not to depict either magician as good or evil. Angier's theft of Borden's teleportation illusion in the film echoes many real-world examples of stolen tricks among magicians. Outside the film, similar rivalries include magicians John Neville Maskelyne and Harry Keller's dispute over a levitation illusion. Gary Westfall of Locus Online also notes a new proclivity for mayhem in the film over the novel, citing the murder/suicide disposition of Angier's duplicates and intensified violent acts of revenge and counter-revenge. This relates to a more general alteration in the events and tone of the film rather than significantly changing the underlying themes. Nor is this theme of cutthroat competition limited to sleight of hand. The script incorporates the popular notion that Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison were directly engaged in the War of the Currents, a rivalry over electrical standards, which appears in the film in parallel to Angier and Borden's competition for magical supremacy. In the novel, Tesla and Edison serve as foils for Angier and Borden, respectively. Dan Schumann of Creative Screenwriting says the film asks how far one would go to devote oneself to an art. The character of Chung Ling-soo, according to Schumann, is a metaphor for this theme. Film critic Alex Manoogian refers to this theme as the meaning of commitment. Nicholas Rappold of Film Comment addresses the points raised by Schumann and Manoogian in terms of the film's refracted take on romanticism, Angier's technological solution which suggests art as a sacrifice, a phoenix-like death of the self, and Borden's more meat and potatoes form of stagecraft embodies the divide between the artist and the social being. For Manoogian the central theme is obsession, but he also notes the supporting themes of the nature of deceit and science as magic. Manoogian criticizes the Nolans for trying to ram too many themes into the story. Touchstone Pictures opted to move the release date forward by a week, from the original October 27 to October 20, 2006. The film earned $14.8 million on opening weekend in the United States, debuting at number 1. It grossed $109 million worldwide, including $53 million from the United States. The film received nominations for the Academy Award for Best Art Direction, Nathan Crowley and Julie Occhipinti, and the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, Wally Pfister, as well as a nomination for the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, Longform in 2007. The film was also nominated for both Best Science Fiction Film and Best Costume Design the Saturn Awards. In July 2026, it was announced that The Prestige would be theatrically re-released in January 2027 for the film's 20th anniversary. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 77% based on 206 reviews, with an average rating of the website's critics' consensus reads, "Full of twists and turns, The Prestige is a dazzling period piece that never stops challenging the audience." Metacritic assigned the film a weighted average score of 66 out of 100, based on 36 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an to F scale. Claudia Poog of USA Today described the film as one of the most innovative, twisting, turning art films of the past decade. Drew McWeeny gave the film a glowing review, saying it demands repeat viewing, with Peter Travers of Rolling Stone agreeing. On At the Movies with Ebert and Roper, Richard Roper and guest critic A.O. Scott gave the film a 2 thumbs up rating. Todd Gilchrist of IGN applauded the performances of Jackman and Bale whilst praising Nolan for making this complex story as easily understandable and effective as he made the outwardly straightforward comic book adaptation. Batman Begins, dense and sophisticated, any truly great performance is almost as much showmanship as it is actual talent, and Nolan possesses both in spades. CNN.com and Village Voice film critic Tom Charity listed it among his best films of 2006. Philip French of The Observer recommended the film, comparing the rivalry between the two main characters to that of Mozart and Salieri in the highly acclaimed Amadeus. On the other hand, Dennis Harvey of Variety criticized the film as gimmicky, though he felt the cast did well in underwritten roles. Kirk Honeycutt of The Hollywood Reporter felt that characters are little more than sketches. Remove their obsessions, and the two magicians have little personality. Nonetheless, the two reviewers praised David Bowie as Tesla, as well as the production values and cinematography. On a simpler note, Emmanuel Levy has said, whether viewers perceive The Prestige as intricately complex or just unnecessarily complicated would depend to a large degree on their willingness to suspend disbelief for 2 hours. He gave the film a B grade. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 stars out of 4, describing the revelation at the end as a fundamental flaw and a cheat. He wrote, "The pledge of Nolan's The Prestige is that the film, having been metaphorically sawed in two, will be restored. It fails when it cheats, as, for example, if the whole woman produced on the stage were not the same one so unfortunately cut in two." Christopher Priest, who wrote the novel the film is based on, saw it 3 times as of January 5, 2007, and his reaction was, "Well, holy shit. I was thinking, God, I like that, and oh, I wish I'd thought of that." The film has grown in stature since its release. In 2009, the A.V. Club named The Prestige as one of the best films of the 2000s. The film was included in American Cinematographers' list of the best shot films from 1998 to 2008, ranking at 36. More than 17,000 people around the world participated in the final vote. In 2020, Empire ranked it among the 100 greatest films of the 21st century. In 2021, members of the Writers Guild of America West and Writers Guild of America, East placed its screenplay at 82 in their list of the 101 greatest screenplays of the 21st century by that point. The Region 1 disc is by Buena Vista Home Entertainment, and was released on February 20, 2007, and is available on DVD and Blu-ray formats. The Warner Brothers. Region 2 DVD was released on March 12, 2007. It is also available in both BD and regionless HD DVD in Europe, before HD DVD was cancelled. Special features are minimal, with the documentary director's notebook, The Prestige, 5 making-of featurettes, running roughly 20 minutes combined, an art gallery and the trailer. Nolan did not contribute to a commentary as he felt the film primarily relied on an audience's reaction and did not want to remove the mystery from the story. The film was released by Warner Brothers Home Entertainment on Ultra HD Blu-ray on December 18, 2017, in the United Kingdom. The film was also released by Touchstone Home Entertainment on Ultra HD Blu-ray on December 19, 2017, in the United States. Christopher Nolan's The Prestige involves the secret world of magicians who obsess over and make profound sacrifices for their craft. They thrive on new ways to make the ordinary do something unexpected, and then, to the audience's delight and wonderment, reveal their mastery over the illusion. In many ways, that's just what Nolan does in this tale of dueling magicians at the turn of the last century. Along with his brother Jonathan Nolan, the director adapts the 1995 novel by Christopher Priest and applies the three-part structure of a magic trick defined in the story. The pledge shows the characters and their motivations, the turn shows them doing extraordinary, impossible things, the prestige reveals the nature of their illusions. Yet, there's another type of magic in the film, the same kind of magic Arthur C. Clarke wrote about in his 1962 book Profiles of the Future, an inquiry into the limits of the possible, when he claimed, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And while the illusions and the science of illusions remain central to the narrative and its complex structure, what's at stake, even more than his characters' fates, is whether Nolan is as accomplished a cinematic magician. His challenge to the audience: are you watching closely? Rewards upon first viewing, but, as with any magic trick, once you know how it's done, the fascination dissolves. This review is not so much a response to an initial screening which, after seeing The Prestige in the theater in 2006, was enthusiastic, but a reaction to subsequent viewings, spoilers to follow. After seeing how the story plays out, how well does the film work? Does it have the same impact, despite the viewer knowing where it ends up? Many of the greatest films continue to grow and improve upon revisiting them, revealing hidden layers and dimensions. It's a key aspect of what makes a classic. Others rely so much on a sense of gamesmanship that a second viewing will never be as satisfying as the first, so they're best left to the fond memory of the initial experience. Certain facets of Nolan's film, his first after directing the blockbuster hit Batman Begins, 2005, have been enriched by time and reward closer inspection. Specifically, Nolan's approach to form, how he creates a novelistic narrative structure and editing technique. However, the emotional payoffs and plot twists become less powerful upon revisitation, after the viewer has been exposed to its secrets, leaving the film to become a site of extraordinary details, most of which service the structure more than the drama. Chronologically, The Prestige begins with two magicians, Robert Angier and Alfred Borden, played by Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, respectively. They both work under Cutter, Michael Caine, who designs their illusions. Angier's talent resides in the performance, in presentation, but at first, he sacrifices nothing for his craft. Borden does, however, and he believes that a great show is less about showmanship and more about the veracity of the illusion. Great magic takes dedication. Borden believes a magician with a great trick cannot perform without first surrendering himself to the act. After Angier's wife, Piper Perabo, dies on stage during an underwater escape routine, he blames Borden for tying the wrong knot and seeks revenge. Angier retaliates out of grief, and the two launch independent acts and stage personas before engaging in a years-long rivalry, each trying to out-magic and expose the other's methods to the public. Though Angier is the more successful of the two financially, as an artist and craftsman, Borden proves superior. Angier's desperation to outshine and thereby destroy Borden consumes him. Each man attends the other performers' shows, and each man sabotages his opponent's routine by posing as an audience volunteer, all while attempting to perfect a new trick. While the craft of magicians remains central to the prestige supported by legendary illusionist, technical advisor, and brief on-screen performer Ricky Jay, much of what makes the film unique is how the Nolans and editor Lee Smith structure the story. Priest's book framed the past through Adam Westley, a contemporary publisher, who reads various documents and investigates the past with differing perspectives and viewpoints on the magicians' rivalry. The film offers what has become a typically intricate structure for Nolan, who resists linear storytelling here in favor of a narrative arranged in the manner of a trick, armed with a reveal that doesn't necessarily occur at the chronological finale. As scholar David Bordwell notes in his book Christopher Nolan, A Labyrinth of Linkages, the film enters from the middle and unfolds across several distinct timelines: the then-present, where Cutter teaches Jess, Samantha Mahurin, Borden's young daughter, a disappearing bird trick; the recent past, involving Borden on trial for murdering Angier, the backstory of Angier and Borden first starting out with Cutter, leading to the fissure in their collaboration and start of their competition, and Angier's trip to Colorado to visit Nikola Tesla, David Bowie, in hopes of acquiring an illusion to outdo Borden's new gimmick, the teleported man. But Tesla does not devise mechanisms that appear magical, he discovers a kind of magic by harnessing the sublime power of nature through science. Nearly every piece of stage magic in the film is explained to us, but there's no explaining Tesla. Nolan often constructs his films in nonlinear terms to draw attention to timelines and structure, therein placing dramatic emphasis where a temporally straightforward presentation might not. The Prestige not only deconstructs the events around Angier and Borden and reorders them into a kind of puzzle, but it also places the narrative within two separate frames. In excerpts from Angier's diary, he reads Borden's encrypted notebook, thereby housing the narrative in a frame within a frame, which the screenplay then segments in a nonlinear format. Such dramatic puzzle work has been relatively commonplace in Hollywood cinema since Quentin Tarantino popularized the trend with 1994's Pulp Fiction, which reframed its narrative in nonlinear chapters. Although the structure sounds confusing, the real feat of the Prestige is that Nolan trusts the audience to piece together the timeline along the way, consciously and unconsciously assembling the crosscut pieces of the narrative. These threads burst onto the screen in the first few minutes, recalling the technique deployed later to disorienting effect on Nolan's Oppenheimer, 2023. But where Oppenheimer's structure rewards and matures on subsequent viewings, after the viewer has gone through the work of assembling the narrative in their mind, the Prestige reveals that the characters have fewer dimensions than one might hope. The film's pleasure derives from the story and characters, but more from the pleasure one experiences from putting the pieces together. Much of the drama involves secrets. How does Borden perform the teleported man? He stands on stage right, in front of the door of a boxed-in enclosure, and bounces a rubber ball toward an identical enclosure on the opposite side of the stage. He steps back into the enclosure, shuts the door, and suddenly opens the door stage left, just in time to catch the ball. Cutter, who works alongside Angier, attempts to convince him that Borden is using a double to accomplish the illusion. But that's too simple for Borden, Angier believes, and he commits himself to discovering Borden's secret. Angier even employs a double, Gerald Root, also Jackman, a comical and duplicitous drunkard, to replicate the trick. What's revealed later is that Borden has committed his life to his craft, or rather, Borden and his identical twin alternate playing the role of his right hand named Fallon, each split between the two personas. They have gone to extreme lengths to conceal that a twin exists, from cutting off fingers to ensure they look the same to keeping his wife Sarah, Rebecca Hall, and child Jess in the dark, regardless of how much it strains their marriage. For Borden's trick, there is no magic, only what he conceals from the world. What's disturbing is how much he eventually sacrifices to preserve his secret, Sarah's emotional well-being and life, his twins' freedom, and his daughter's livelihood. But just as The Teleported Man is about doubles, The Prestige draws thematic parallels between Borden and Angier, each of whom have their on-stage doubles while also reflecting one another. Nolan reinforces this throughout with cinematographer Wally Pfister framing Borden and Angier in identical shots in various scenes, suggesting that the two magicians have parallel obsessions, similar drives, and will meet the same ruinous end. For Angier, he seeks Telsa's help to replicate Borden's trick, and Tesla builds him a mysterious machine that, from the audience's perspective, seems to actually teleport him. Angier learns that the machine doesn't teleport, it copies. Regardless, he takes the machine to the stage, knowing that its use in his version of Borden's trick will be unrepeatable because there is only one machine. And so, he takes Borden's philosophy to live the act to a deathly extreme, resolving to kill a version of himself each night, self-destruction, both literal and symbolic, on an unthinkable scale, all in service of a stage performance to outmaneuver Borden. Like Dr. Frankenstein, Angier becomes an engrossed madman who wields an uncontrollable scientific force to satisfy an emotional craving. Angier even allows Borden, one of the twins, anyway, to endure a trial, imprisonment, and execution. After Borden discovers Tesla's machine in the trap room, with a copy of Angier locked inside, drowning, Cutter arrives on the scene and assumes Borden has trapped Angier. Neither of them suspects the disturbing reality, that Angier sacrifices a version of himself, possibly even his actual self, night after night. Because the Prestige has submerged itself in the fixated missions of these two illusionists, the women in their lives feel underdeveloped, a common and fair criticism of Nolan's output. The director never adequately confronts the inherently creepy nature of Borden and Fallon's relationship with Sarah, each taking turns playing her husband. In another director's hands, Borden's dynamic with Sarah would be the premise of an unnerving identical twin film Akin to Dead Ringers, 1988. Sarah senses that there's something wrong with her husband. Sometimes when her husband declares his love, it's true, other times, as she observes, not today. One brother loves Sarah, the other prefers Olivia, Scarlett Johansson, Angier's assistant who switches sides. While Sarah's eventual depression, alcoholism, and suicide in response to her husband's seemingly split personality feel like afterthoughts to the central competition, Olivia is a plot device rather than someone who exists organically within this world. She also has no arc and disappears from the film without ample closure for her character. These are secondary concerns for Nolan, who often makes films about obsessives who commit to a philosophy or an idea and make all other relationships in their lives secondary. See following: 1998, Memento, 2000, Inception, 2010, The Dark Knight Trilogy, and Oppenheimer. Besides the duality of Angier and Borden, their shared obsessions, and themes of twins and doubles, an extra-textual duality exists around The Prestige in its similarities to The Illusionist, another film about turn-of-the-century magicians released earlier in 2006, this one directed by Neil Berger and starring Edward Norton, Paul Giamatti, and Jessica Biel. Both involve skilled magicians who use their talents for all-consuming pursuits, both offer little dimension to their female characters, both are handsomely mounted productions, sparing no expense on sets, costumes, and production values. The Prestige remains superior for how Nolan once again weighs the fallout of obsession, suicide, physical violence, wrongful execution, and repeated self-annihilation. But unfortunately, both films rely on a ham-fisted device of explaining the finale by flashing back to earlier footage to remind the viewer of the clues they missed, a technique popularized by the lazy if effective ending of The Usual Suspects, 1995, to reveal the film as an elaborate Kaiser Soze lie. If Nolan's use of this technique isn't so blatant as Berger's, it's no less pandering. Even without that montage finale, Nolan disrupts the emotional integrity of his ending for the viewer with a post-text choice. The prestigious chilling last shot shows Angier drowned in a tank, an image the viewer saw earlier, but now with the full scope of Angier's self-destructive agenda in mind. The image might have lingered and even haunted the viewer. Instead, without skipping a beat, the credits roll, and Tom York's analyze echoes on the soundtrack. It's clear why Nolan chose the song. Its lyrics speak of playing a part and having no time to make sense or think things through, which are on point for Nolan's desire to create a puzzle of a film and encourage the audience to assemble its pieces. However, the sudden shift from an early 20th century mindset to a contemporary song provides a jarring and ungainly anachronism in a film otherwise immersed in its period setting. Rather than allow the viewer to sit with the final image in silence or consider its implications with some moody period-appropriate music from David Julian's score, the York song betrays the moment and neutralizes its lasting power. This ungainly jolt has always bothered me and always left me with a lingering sour taste about the otherwise engaging experience. A scene early in the film has Borden alleviating Sarah's concern about how a dangerous bullet catch trick is accomplished by revealing its secret. "Once you know it's so obvious," she remarks dismissively after he shows her the simple solution. Watching The Prestige a second time is a similar experience. Once the viewer knows how Nolan's cinematic puzzle fits together, the wonder is gone. Instead of improving or revealing new dimensions with each new viewing, it becomes a flatter film, best appreciated for the surface-level details of the production, the two excellent performances by Jackman and Bale, the splendor of its visuals, and the thematically intricate symbolism. However, the potency of the dramatic turns and their emotional wallop are so closely tied to the puzzle quality of the film's structure that they prove less effective after Nolan reveals his tricks. Regardless, it's easy to see what draws Nolan to this material. A filmmaker of his caliber is a 21st-century magician, using craft, artistry, and science to create a smoke and mirrors show best reserved for a single sitting. Beyond that, Nolan reveals himself to be an expert craftsman with a fascinating, unconventional approach to narrative structure. If The Prestige is a disappointment on another viewing from an audience perspective, it's also worth investigating, like trying to understand how a master magician has accomplished his illusion. The Prestige is a 2006 mystery drama film directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale in the lead roles. It follows two rival stage musicians in the 19th century that compete with each other with tragic consequences. It is a tale about obsession, secrecy, rivalry, and sacrifice, and those themes are solidly explored, although because there are too many of them, not all of them get proper treatment. But the story is overall very engaging and at times quite riveting. Some of the middle parts are forgettable, but the last act is the standout as it is a perfect conclusion with a very satisfying twist. Unlike the twist in Memento, I found this one more believable and easier to understand. This twist is much better in my opinion, and the overall story is easier to follow, but on the other hand, it is at times too easy and not as smart as it thinks it is. The characters I found solid, but not great. The two protagonists, Angier and Borden, are great when their profession and obsession is concerned, but they barely get any development in other areas, and the relationship aspect I found rather unexplored here. Cutter is a very good character with some very powerful quotes, and Tesla is solidly imagined with an intriguing backstory. As for the women, they pale in comparison to the male characters. But the acting is excellent across the board, with Jackman and Bale being the standouts. Both give terrific performances here and both get their heartbreaking and powerful moments. Michael Caine is also very good and Scarlett Johansson is solid, but this is above all a great vehicle for Bale and Jackman, who drive the movie. It has a pretty suave direction from Nolan with some excellent imagery, but I wish the photography wasn't as dark, as I find that extremely annoying. The script is uneven in the middle, but it is mostly very polished and the editing is good, except for that middle part. The acting is great, as is the tone and dialogue, which is stupendous. The movie is visually appealing, but it would have been even more powerful had it been lighter. It is a very memorable and in some respects even an authentic movie, as we rarely get to see this subject matter explored in movies. It does have a brain, but it also has a heart which I found very pleasing. It is very heartwarming at times and it is even devastating in the end. The actors greatly convey emotion and add a lot to the movie's emotional intensity. If I had to compare it with other Nolan's films, I would honestly say it is my favorite film from his after Interstellar, and it is a shame that both audiences and critics do not agree and both are not big fans. It has its problems, but the overall fascinating nature of it is what makes it really good. And I like its execution in that it is propelled with realism, but that it also mixes some real magic in there later on. The mix is executed in a great way and it is never jarring. Christopher Nolan's The Prestige has just about everything I require in a movie about magicians, except The Prestige. We are instructed at the outset, in a briefing by Michael Caine, that every magic trick consists of 3 acts: the pledge, in which a seemingly real situation is set up, the turn, in which the initial reality is challenged, and the prestige, where all is set right again. An example, one not used in the film, would be a woman, and it's always a woman, except with Penn and Teller, who is placed into a box, the box is sawed in half, and the halves separated, and magically, the victim is restored in one piece. The pledge of Nolan's The Prestige is that the film, having been metaphorically sawed in 2, will be restored. It fails when it cheats, as, for example, if the whole woman produced on the stage were not the same one so unfortunately cut in 2. Other than that fundamental flaw, which leads to some impenetrable revelations toward the end, it's quite a movie, atmospheric, obsessive, almost satanic. It takes place in Victorian London, at a time and place where seances and black magic were believed in by the credulous. Somerset Maugham's novel The Magician captures that period perfectly in its fictional portrait of Aleister Crowley, the most evil man in the world, who created the illusion that he really was an occult practitioner of dark forces. He had a gift for persuading women to materialize in his bed. These days, when most of us are less superstitious, it is the technical craft of a David Copperfield that impresses us. We see the trick done, but do not for a moment believe it is happening. Houdini, the great transitional figure between magical acts and ingenious tricks, was at pains to explain that everything he did was a trick. He offered rewards, never collected, for any supernatural act he could not explain. The amazing Randy carries on in the same tradition, bending spoons as easily as Uri Geller. And yet in Houdini's time, there were those who insisted he was doing real magic. How else could his effects be achieved? Daniel Mark Epstein wrote about the Houdini believers in a 1986 issue of the New Criterion, which I read as I read everything I can get my hands on about Houdini. The thing was, Houdini really did free himself from those fetters and chains and sealed trunks dropped into the river, and survived the Chinese water torture, an effect used prominently in The Prestige night after night. But there were those who argued his tricks were physically impossible, and thus must be supernatural. Houdini would have been active at the time of The Prestige, but his insights would have been fatal to the movie's plot, which is the problem with the plot. We meet 2 apprentice magicians, Robert Angier, Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, Christian Bale, who work as fake volunteers from the audience for Milton the Magician, the invaluable Ricky J. They assist in tying up a helpless damsel, in reality, Robert's wife, Julia, Piper Perabo, and lowering her into the Chinese water torture box. Concealed by curtains, she somehow escapes, as Houdini always did, but one night, Alfred ties her knots too tightly, she cannot escape, and by the time a manager, Michael Caine, rushes on stage with an axe, it is too late to save her from drowning. This sets off a lifelong hatred between Robert and Alfred, during which the frigid and ominous Alfred rises to the top of the profession. The hapless Alfred, now in love with his new assistant Olivia, played by Scarlett Johansson, falls to the bottom, is reduced to performing in flea pits, and yet presents an illusion named the Transported Man, in which he walks into a door on one side of the stage and instantly emerges from a door at the other. How is that physically possible? It's the sort of thing that made his fans claim Houdini was supernormal. Robert becomes obsessed with finding the secret of the trick. But magicians do not explain their illusions, not even to their peers, unless money changes hands. The trick is told when the trick is sold. The Transported Man begins, you will agree, with a terrific pledge. Now how will Robert ever discover the secret of the prestige? He treks into the snows of Colorado to visit the hidden laboratory of the real-life Nikola Tesla, David Bowie, who may have manufactured the trick for Alfred. Tesla, the discoverer/inventor of alternating current, was believed at the time to be capable of all manner of wonders with the genie of electricity, but how could AC, or even DC, explain the Transported Man? You will not learn here. What you will learn in the movie is, I believe, a disappointment, nothing but a trick about a trick. With a sinking heart, I realized that the prestige had jumped the rails, and that rules we thought were in place no longer applied. I have been in love with magic all my life. I'm no good at it, even though I bored my friends for years with cheesy illusions, and even today can make a dime disappear from your forehead. These days I am most impressed with the skills required for close-up magic. Teddy Nava, the son of Ryder directors Gregory Nava and Anna Thomas, can make cards change while I am holding them in my hands. Now how does he do that? Not through divine intervention, I am fairly sure. But I was holding them. The trick is told when the trick is sold. Yes, but what if it takes months of practice after you're told the trick? Nikola Tesla isn't going to help me then, by running alternating current down Teddy's arm and up mine. It has been nearly 15 years since Christopher Nolan blew our minds with his period psychological thriller The Prestige. For those who haven't seen it, a quick glance at the synopsis won't really do the film justice. Yes, it's about two rival magicians duking it out in an escalating game of one-upmanship. But like every Nolan picture, there is so much more simmering under the surface, both intellectually and creatively. And as always, Nolan's storytelling is both challenging and absorbing. Set in late Victorian London, Nolan starts his story, which he co-wrote with his brother Jonathan, by hinting at its end, a magic trick gone bad, a murder trial, a man's life hanging in the balance. But we quickly learn The Prestige is a movie full of illusions, and in it Nolan steadily drops pieces of information for us to pick up and process. They're all aimed at giving both context and clarity to those early teases. The story of aspiring magicians Robert Angier, Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, Christian Borden, begins with the two men working as audience plants and stagehands for Milton the Magician, played by real-life illusionist Ricky J. Nolan favorite Michael Caine plays John Cutter, their mentor and the architect for Milton's numerous stage devices. While doing a live water tank trick, Angier's wife Julia, Piper Perabo, drowns after Alfred tests a new knot when tying her up. Because of it, she's unable to escape from the tank, and Robert holds Alfred responsible. The two become bitter rivals, both professionally and personally. Even as their individual careers begin to take off, neither can shake their obsession with the other. The animosity really amps up once Alfred unveils his masterpiece, a trick he calls the Transported Man. Audiences are amazed, and a jealous Robert is consumed with figuring out Alfred's secret regardless of the cost. If it takes ruining his relationship with his new stage assistant Olivia, Scarlett Johansson, so be it. Even if it takes spending gobs of money going to America to meet eccentric scientist Nikola Tesla, a fantastic David Bowie. What starts as a rivalry quickly festers into deceit and betrayal. Those caught in the middle of their feud are little more than collateral damage. Whether it's Olivia or, even worse, Alfred's wife Sarah, Rebecca Hall. Nolan digs deep into the ugliness of such obsession, yet both Alfred and Robert are still characters of complexity and nuance. And as the story uncoils in a wave of final act reveals, you realize that Nolan, as he always does, has more on his mind than it first seems. The casting couldn't be more in tune, and it starts at the top with Jackman's ambitious American and Bale's cocky Cockney. Both actors really dig into the layers of their characters, and there are many of them, using their faults and virtues to paint two murky yet utterly fascinating portraits. Great performances from Johansson and Hall help color in the two men they're caught between. And David Bowie is magnetic in a small but unforgettable role. The Prestige came out right on the heels of Christopher Nolan's first big-budget blockbuster, 2005's Batman Begins. But it proved that he still knew how to tell a deep yet tightly focused story. And it still looks amazing, both the cinematography and production design. It could come out this weekend and easily pass for a current-day movie, rivaling anything else out there. It's yet another testament to Nolan's greatness and diversity as a filmmaker and storyteller. A century ago in London, stage magicians are afforded celebrity status. Good ones can reach the heights of modern-day pop stars. Robert Angier and Alfred Borden are just getting their start in the business, working with a magic engineer named Cutter in the service of a mediocre older magician. When a dangerous trick goes wrong on stage, resulting in the death of Angier's wife, it begins a deep and bitter feud between the two men that will last the length of their careers. Angier is the superior showman, and he more easily becomes a heralded magician and box office draw. Borden, often impoverished with his wife and young daughter, is a little wooden on stage, but he's far better at designing jaw-dropping illusions. As their acts of revenge against each other grow more malicious, Angier becomes obsessed with one of Borden's illusions, calling it the greatest magic trick I have ever seen. Intent on stealing both the secret and effective performance of the trick, Angier travels to America to track down the reclusive Nikola Tesla in Colorado Springs. He's convinced that Tesla helped design Borden's great trick through his experiments in the developing field of electricity. He offers to pay Tesla any amount of money to build the same apparatus for him. Back in London, Angier's beautiful assistant Olivia has become a pawn to both men and the mistress of one. Each seeks to use her to get at the other and uncover his secrets. And when Angier unveils a mysterious new illusion, or is it, he acquired in America, it becomes clear that each man will do absolutely anything to finally defeat the other. In a dark film where things are rarely what they seem, you must traverse the entire story before identifying what positive elements may exist. At the very least, The Prestige shows the destructive power of revenge, obsession, and self-ambition. Those who can't let go of a need to win, a need to know, a need to execute their own view of justice suffer ever-escalating consequences for their refusal to forgive and accept. From stage, magicians make vague claims about supernatural power as part of their acts. And one never-explained trick with unfathomable implications to the human soul is implausibly attributed to science. Off-stage, a few characters briefly consider whether Angier or Borden may be exercising real magic, and the audience is left to wonder the same. By and large, though, the focus is on the spiritual emptiness of these two competing illusionists, not their access to spiritual forces beyond this realm. Angier is shown shirtless in bed with his wife, as the couple begin kissing. For a while, Borden lives with a woman outside of wedlock. One of the magicians is seen making out with Olivia, who wears cleavage-revealing period outfits both on stage and in the bedroom. A nude painting is briefly seen. Although the amount of actual blood shown is limited, the body count piles up, sometimes in extraordinarily mysterious ways. Several central characters are killed, some maliciously. 2 are drowned, 2 are hanged, 1 is a suicide, and 2 are shot at close range in full view of the camera. Another is buried alive. The rivalry between the magicians leads to falls through trapdoors and the intentional sabotage of tricks involving guns and mechanical apparatuses. The results are damaged legs, bloodied and lost fingers, and a dead bird or 2. Several corpses are shown, including one laid out in a morgue, still intact. Interestingly, the relative restraint shown by the filmmakers while detailing this violence actually seems to give it more realistic weight. And it adds to the sense of dread as viewers anticipate the next attack. Aside from 5 or so uses of the English profanity bloody, harsh language includes using God's name for swearing 2 or 3 times, along with scattered uses of d, n and bastard. Drinks are downed in pubs and restaurants. One character, whom I shall intentionally leave unnamed here, is a drunkard whose alcoholism results in negative consequences for himself and others. Borden's wife, one can only assume they eventually got married, considering the time frame, turns to drink as the weight of her husband's secrets wears her down. Borden is also shown drunk at least once. The entire story involves deception, double crosses, secrets and sabotage. However, none of those things yield positive results. Working from a novel by Christopher Priest, Batman Begins director Christopher Nolan and his brother, Jonathan, who co-wrote this screenplay, build into their film a promise, of sorts. "You'll be satisfied and amazed by the time we deliver the prestige," they seem to be saying as they steadily set the stage and raise the stakes on screen. The prestige, they tell us, is the part of a trick where the magician performs the mind-boggling conclusion to his best illusion. The Nolans kept that promise for me, pulling off the whole tricky non-linear in plain sight sleight of camera thing without tipping me to some of the final dark and astounding secrets. So as a puzzle, the film succeeds wildly. As a story, however, the sense that you can never quite trust the motivations of these often unsympathetic characters kept me from fully engaging emotionally in what happens to them. Taking a very different cinematic approach than Neil Burger's blurry, historical magician tale The Illusionist, which arrived in theaters only a month or so before The Prestige, the Nolan's team creates realistic period set pieces for London and Colorado Springs but films them through clear-eyed camera lenses and with modern angles. The result is that the film feels authentic to its era, but with the nostalgic period movie barrier between screen and audience removed. That immediacy is both fresh and a little cold. Perhaps the Nolan's greatest trick of all is to make us forget that we're watching Wolverine, Batman, and his butler, Gollum and David Bowie. Instead, Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Andy Serkis and even Bowie slip convincingly into their dark Victorian personas. And they are dark. It gives nothing away to reveal that this is not a feel-good story. By the time the lights come up, the tone rings much closer to that of a horror movie than a period drama. In spite of a certain circumspection related to how the movie presents some of its sobering themes, the willingness to maim and kill for one's own selfish obsessions, chief among them, the Nolans unleash the monsters of the human soul right before our eyes, subjecting their characters to the harsh consequences of their own hubris, refusal to own up to wrong choices and vengeful spirits. Love, happiness, decency, and restoration are all sacrificed for the sake of self-glory, deception and the defeat of rivals. In a way, The Prestige challenges the very notion of a successful magician, at least of that era. As Angier describes it, the audience longs to believe, even for a moment, that there's something unexpected and unknowable beyond this cruel, mundane world. The magician delivers that by creating an elaborate deception. But what part of his own soul and identity must he sacrifice to become such a skillful liar? And can anyone ever truly love another, or even himself, for reaching the top of the illusionist's ladder by becoming the most secretive, the least honest, the furthest from the light of day? For these two masters of the craft, anyway, the film's answer is absolutely not. Is The Prestige Christopher Nolan's greatest film? Of course, it has strong competition from The Dark Knight and Memento. Of course, readers will also point to Inception, Interstellar and Dunkirk. But in my humble opinion, it's comparable to Coppola's The Conversation. He squeezed that in between Godfather Part 1 and 2 and I reckon it beats both of them. For Nolan, he squeezed The Prestige in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and again, I reckon it beats both of them, and every other Nolan film. Let's set the scene. It's the late 19th century, and the great Dante, Hugh Jackman, is performing magic tricks in front of a captive audience. He tells the audience that for his final trick he will teleport himself. A machine crackles with lightning and Dante steps into it. The curtain drops, hiding him from the audience. A trapdoor opens, and he falls into a water tank. During this occurrence, a man, Christian Bale, sneaks backstage to see Dante trapped in the water tank. He seems to know Dante, Bale turns out to be a rival magician, Alfred Borden, and is accused of Dante's murder. Of course, beginning the film with the ending is a cliché as old as time. Nolan used it in Inception as well. However, Nolan keeps us focused by utilizing a non-linear narrative to his advantage. As the film goes on, Borden reads Dante's journal, in prison, and in Dante's journal, Dante writes about reading Borden's journal. It's a Nolan film, you know you'll have to pay close attention to everything. However, I reckon it's Nolan's best use of non-linearity in his film catalog. I thought its use was pointless and frustrating in Dunkirk. There's close competition with Memento, where the beginning is the ending, literally, but The Prestige doesn't hold the audience's hand, as much as, say, Inception does. There are twists and turns, but it isn't a film that seems trivial after the twists and turns are revealed. You can watch it over and over again, to admire its non-linearity and absorb all of the clues and red herrings that are hurled your way. It takes more than one viewing to pick everything apart, to sort out the structure and narrative in your mind. Not only that, but it's a Nolan film that rewards the viewers with viable payoffs, rather than barraging the viewer with loud music, long scenes of exposition and being clever without being condescending. It remains Nolan's most incisive and intricate script. But for the script and plot to work, the actors have to be on top form. And everyone here is on top form. Christian Bale's Cockney accent doesn't grind the ears, and it's probably in his top 3 performances. I'll always think his turn in Empire of the Sun is his best. Hugh Jackman shows subtlety and bravado in his turn as the great Dante. Michael Caine is, well, Michael Caine. While the females aren't given strong character arcs like the males, they still stand out among the packed cast. Oh, David Bowie as Nikola Tesla is a piece of casting genius. Rip Bowie, rip. As a devout Christopher Nolan fanboy, one of the most difficult decisions I have ever made in my meaningless life was choosing which Nolan epic I would review first. If you have read any of my first 2 top 10 lists, you'll know I have a particular affinity for The Dark Knight. However, The Prestige was streaming on my flight home from New York the other day, so the decision sort of made itself. The person next to me vomited on me during the landing, so hopefully that won't play into my reactions. The Prestige is a film about 2 dueling magicians who engage in a rivalry of fantastic showmanship and obsession. Robert the Great Danton Aniger, Hugh Jackman, and Alfred the Professor Borden, Christian Bale, begin the film as understudies to Cutter, Michael Caine, and each progressively try to outdo each other with newer, more ambitious illusions. But what starts as trying to best their rival, snowballs into different forms of sabotage and aggression, where victory must be achieved at all costs, even if they cannot rise to the occasion with their own tricks. One of the film's greatest strengths is that it follows its own rules to illusions. Nolan takes a partial nonlinear approach to telling this story. We are given flashbacks and cutaways, and while it is obvious that they all aren't happening at the same time, we aren't truly told which happened first until the 3rd act. But there is enough information available that you could piece together the tricks of the mind he is pulling, but only if you knew what to look for. Just like a trick in the film, the audience is misdirected with flashier details to conceal how the true magic happens. When I write this, it sounds cheap, but in reality, it is the very point of the film. Nolan creates a movie about magic by using magic. We are told from the beginning that Borden is on trial for the murder of Angier as part of a sabotage gone too far, and Cutter is forced to tell the judge all about the 2 men and the ridiculous contraptions they used to create their illusions. Michael Caine has a way about him that when he explains something, it always sounds deep and enchanted, making his casting as a man who creates magic tricks for performers a brilliant choice. The 2 leads are brilliantly acted by Jackman and Bale. I find it humorous that Jackman is presented as the morally superior protagonist to Bale's backstabbing antagonist, when in reality, both of them are so far detached from humanity and lack any semblance of empathy. Both perform dubious, petty, and likely illegal acts on each other to get the upper hand, but goddamn if Jackman isn't a charming bastard, I do not know anyone else who is. I mean, he kidnaps and buries a man alive to get a diary that doesn't belong to him, and it is just brushed over like it is nothing. But he does it all so handsomely. As far as character building goes, both leads have enough personal connections to make their motivations understandable before they totally go off the deep end. Borden accidentally killed Angier's wife during a trick, and Angier shot off Borden's fingers. The only sensible way to get through that is with stage magic. Perhaps it is the point all along to watch them go from reasonably motivated to clinically psychotic to show just how consuming and competitive the world of magic is, or more realistically, how powerful obsession can change who you are as a person. The film relies on two major twists in what manifests into reveals of who the two leads pulled off their greatest tricks, and personally, only one really works for me. Both provide a decent experience within the film, but only Borden's trick is truly revealed to be clever and reasonable within the world that is set up. Not that Angier's isn't fascinating, but it changes our understanding of what we thought was allowed about midway through the film, which leaves an unsatisfactory taste in my mouth. While we are provided with more information with regards to the story of how Angier learned his trick, which includes a fun performance from the late David Bowie as Nikola Tesla and the rare Andy Serkis character not in motion capture pajamas, it does not show us how Angier outplanned Borden, rather how he just made his own rules. And perhaps that is why Bale's Borden is more compelling to me as a character. Throughout the entire film, he is presented as the magician that is willing to take more risks and has a far more astute eye for magic. He does not need assistance in creating his master trick, whereas Angier does. It just seems that he is always a step ahead of Angier, and whereas he is at his best when he uses his brain, Angier is at his best when he puts on a show. And even when it appears he lost because he is in jail for Angier's murder, the film makes you aware that maybe he is still in control of the situation. Unfortunately, there really are not any compelling females in this film. Scarlett Johansson's Olivia Wenscombe gets the most screen time and she has a convincing enough British accent, but she, like every other woman in the film, is just a prop for the male leads to use for motivation or a side love story that will ultimately end in betrayal and really takes away from the story. Minor roles are important, but I believe she could have been more versatile than she was, especially since they began to tease her as someone with a deeper understanding of performing, but do not really build on it enough for anyone to care. Instead, she is just a seductive object that the two magicians use to put on a magic show, which is a big disappointment. What The Prestige comes down to is entertainment. It is a film about two showmen who do in fact, put on quite the show for their audience. The stories of competition and obsession are compelling, but the film's legacy is built on its display of magic and wonder. Its ability to make you feel as though you are sitting in the stage theater with the on-screen audience is alluring and most perfectly encapsulates the mystic that Nolan was trying to create. It is not perfect, but it is objectively good and everyone watching will be thoroughly interested and mystified. What more can you ask for from a film? The second of 2006's fin de siècle magician thrillers is also the better of the two. That said, it's not really fair to compare Christopher Nolan's The Prestige to The Illusionist. The two films are playing entirely different games. In this case, we have a wholly effective thriller with very little at its core, but it's hard to complain about a film this self-assured and stylish. Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale play Robert Angier and Alfred Borden, two rival magicians in the early years of Edwardian London. Giving away the plot would be a sin. Let it only be said that both men are trying to create the world's greatest illusion, not for love of the craft but in order to one-up each other. Michael Caine and Scarlett Johansson are on hand to aid in this war, although how they do so is best left a surprise. In all honesty, it doesn't take much to figure out where the plot is going to twist and turn long before it gets there. But I can't persuade myself that it matters. This is not a film like The Illusionist, where the film's audience is equal to the magician's audience. For all that its plot follows the structure of a magic trick, neatly laid out for us in the opening moments of the film, The Prestige possesses a stage-eye view of the proceedings, and we are meant not to be dazzled by the trickery but complicit in the sordid ways in which it is effected. The script is a treasure, like Nolan's Memento. It's a twisty mess of flashbacks nested within each other, hopping from era to era with little fanfare. This is not, I think, meant to confuse us, sleight of hand, but simply to mimic the confusion and fragmentation that the revenge-addled protagonists suffer from throughout the proceedings. Moreover, given that the primary conflict is driven by an event in the long-distant past, it makes sense that the past would keep insisting on poking its way into the constantly shifting present. Unlike most mindfuck films, where twistiness is its own justification, this brilliantly structured story earns every flashback. Which is not to say it lives and dies by its script. Christopher Nolan is a brilliant director of images, and his work with longtime collaborator Wally Pfister is possibly their best yet. I adored the nihilistic blacks of Batman Begins, but even I have to admit that everything about The Prestige looks better. It's a world on the cusp of indoor electrical lights, and the camera lovingly captures every detail of the dusky light that entails. I can't in good faith call any of it very imaginative, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been done well. It's by turns gloomy, mysterious, and occasionally cheerful, and that sort of tonal shifting must be saluted. The cast is uniformly fine, although Johansson doesn't get much to do. The absolute standout, however, is David Bowie in an extended cameo as Nikola Tesla. The role doesn't make sense, but it's flashy and impossible to resist, and in this way it is a perfect match for the former Ziggy Stardust. And for the film as a whole, gorgeous, unsubtle, and extraordinarily talented. Once magic was an art, now it's a craft. Tricks can be copied, or learned from books. Conjurers have lost their sense of wonder because science has proved to be more astonishing than sawing a lady's legs off, or stuffing doves down your trousers. At the turn of the century before last, magic was about invention. Performers vied with each other to create the next most amazing thing. It was a time of innovation and competitive zeal. Incredulity became the challenge. And there was money to be made. The Prestige captures this mood perfectly. Its problem is layering the illusion so thick that reality pales into insignificance. It begins with a murder trial and ends with a murder. Is that symmetry, or a trick of the light? It is the story of a rivalry. Two magicians work the London theatres as a double act, until a tragic accident splits them apart. The American Angier, Hugh Jackman, has charisma and stage presence. The Englishman Borden, Christian Bale, has technique and a genius for new ideas. The team that dazzled cinemagoers with Memento, 2000, brothers Christopher and Jonathan Nolan, have adapted Christopher Priest's novel and, as you would expect, it is far from simple. The words have, clever and too come to mind. At the center or, at least, lurking backstage in every scene change of this Victorian melodrama, is Cutter, Michael Caine, once again superb, who appears to be the trick maker, the manager, the eminence grise. Beyond his sphere of influence, plotting against each other, are the protagonists, searching the deep recesses of their imagination for real magic. Borden might have found it with his transportation of man trick until Angier spends a fortune on a reclusive American inventor, David Bowie, who is experimenting with electricity. Some films envelope you, others baffle you. The Prestige is a mixture of the two. It looks terrific and does what Terry Gilliam's The Brothers Grimm should have done, but didn't. It gives the illusionists lives outside their vaudevillian personas. Also, the performances of Bale and Rebecca Hall, as Borden's wife Sarah, are beyond the call of duty. This is a film that works best after it is over, when you have a chance to fit the pieces together. As with a favorite jigsaw, some of the pieces are missing, but it doesn't spoil the enjoyment. Never before have I seen so many moviegoers flail their arms as they exit the theater. In fact, an astute patron would liken the reaction to that of a crowd that has just seen an amazing magic trick. I have a feeling that's exactly how the screenwriting team of brothers Christopher and Jonathan Nolan want it. To be sure, The Prestige is a staggering labyrinth of deceit and double crosses to the likes of which haven't been seen since Memento, the Nolan's breakthrough feature in 2000. Ever since they were aspiring magicians, Robert Angier, Jackman, and Alfred Borden, Bale, have constantly been in heated competition. These are the kind of guys who can be in back row of the magic show and instantaneously figure out each other's tricks. That is until Borden performs an illusion that completely dumbfounds Angier. Things rev up even further when Olivia Wenskum, Johansson, enters the picture as Angier's assistant. I hasten to provide further synopsis. The Prestige is one of those films where it pays to be uneducated regarding the plot. The likely response by the average attendee, after the aforementioned flailing of the arms, will be to insist upon seeing the film again. The final 20 minutes provide enough shocks and gasps for the next 3 Nolan-induced brain twisters. Pivotal to the film's success are the 2 lead performances, and Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale are spot on. Jackman's everyman demeanor contrasts perfectly with Bale's dead-eye stare. Both men completely sell their magic tricks, emanating the same sense of wonder as those seen in The Illusionist just a few months ago, only with fewer special effects. Michael Caine does his patented wise-ass old man routine as Cutter, the constructor of the apparatuses used by Angier. Scarlett Johansson is given the thankless role as the love interest, but is nevertheless effective in the scenes where her bust isn't in the foreground. David Bowie even turns up as Tesla, the shady inventor who is competing against Thomas Edison when it comes to electricity. Christopher Nolan's direction, save for a few slow spots in the second act, is near perfection. The look he has created, along with cinematographer Wally Pfister, is haunting, gorgeous, and certainly Oscar-worthy. The screenplay hops around in time, but, as Nolan proved with Memento, he is up to the task. This is crisp, engaging storytelling through the eyes of a director who, just when one thinks he can't improve any more after Batman Begins, continues to bring something new to the Cineplex with each feature. The Prestige is a classy, thinking person's picture with the kind of complicated plot that will have you analyzing for days. It begs for repeated viewings and will likely get them from moviegoers who want to crack Nolan's own theatrical magic trick. After seeing the movie trailer for this, it became my most anticipated movie of the fall. It looked fresh and exciting, an original movie property about turn-of-the-century magicians in a movie landscape littered with copycats, remakes, and sequels. Then, another turn-of-the-century magician movie came out, but it didn't really do anything to lessen my anticipation for this one. It turns out Christopher Nolan's The Prestige is the best turn-of-the-century magic movie of the fall. Actually, it's a pretty ideal fall movie, in that the action and spectacle aren't big enough for the summer blockbuster season, the tone isn't heady enough for the winter Oscar season, it's not epic enough for the Christmas blockbuster season, but it's far too good for the post-New Year dumping grounds. Certainly not a perfect movie, it doesn't quite match my anticipation levels, it's a solid 2 hours of entertainment that should provide you an entertaining evening at the movies. The movie is a thriller about 2 rival magicians, Rupert Angier, Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, Christian Bale, former colleagues who go their separate ways after tragedy, both determined to make their mark in the world of magic, or magic, as the movie is careful to point out that what these men do are tricks, and they are practitioners of tricks, not wizards. When Borden comes up with an amazing trick, Angier obsessively tries to learn the secret of the trick to outdo Borden, to the extent where he loses the support of his mentor Cutter, Michael Caine, and his assistant and lover Olivia Wenskum, Scarlett Johansson. As one might expect from a movie about rival magicians, The Prestige is a cat-and-mouse game of one-upsmanship that comes to a head by the end fairly spectacularly. The mystery around the movie is solid, although an attentive viewer should be able to figure out the big twist halfway through. I did. The leads all turn in solid performances, with Jackman as the narrowly determined Angier and Bale as the less flashy, more talented, and probably darker Borden. Caine is his dependable father figure self, Johansson is seductive in her small part, and David Bowie is perfectly cast as the mysterious Nikola Tesla. However, the movie does feel a bit sterile at times, with Nolan not quite tapping into the charisma of his leads to the fullest. The look of the movie is fantastic, with Nolan having a great eye and mind of knowing what to show and when. It's easy to get swept up in the showmanship of the movie's focus. The secret to a great magic trick, as explained by Caine's cutter in the movie, is its three-act structure. First is the pledge, where the performer shows you the ordinary and promises to do the extraordinary. The second is the turn, where he turns the ordinary into something more, and the third is the prestige, the final flourish, where the magician does something we've never seen before and the audience applauds. For the movie, Nolan does a great job with the pledge and the turn, but could have used a bit of work with the prestige. It's a fine trick pulled off with the prestige, one well worth your entertainment dollars and time, but not the unbelievable trick I'd hoped it to be. Are you watching closely? That is the first line heard in the prestige as the camera pans along the ground to reveal a sea of identical hats laying on the ground. These two clues can immediately clue you into the magic trick that is about to take place before your eyes. These aren't the only hints, of course. The Prestige is the type of movie that lays it all out before it just flat out spells out its twist and becomes even more obvious on a second viewing and through deep analysis. There are little details you can continue to find out on subsequent viewings. Each time through brings something new, and the best movies can do that for the viewer. The Prestige was Christopher Nolan's buffer movie that he put together between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and it is arguably a better movie than either of them. Its narrative is tight and twisty, the performances are great across the board, and the visuals are top-notch in building the atmosphere of the film. With Nolan's newest twisting head-scratcher, Tenet, hitting theaters, it feels like a good time to look back on one of the sometimes overlooked entries in his filmography. I first saw The Prestige when I was in college, and this was one of two movies released around that time that gave me a new appreciation for films. This movie did something for me. It made me think, long after I left the theater, about the implications of what had happened and the lengths that the characters were willing to go to beat their rivals. I've watched it many times since, and it always brings something new to notice, or just to remind me how intricately plotted and designed this movie was to clue the viewer in without giving away the secret. If you haven't seen The Prestige, well then go watch it right now, because I'm about to spoil the hell out of it. The Prestige can hardly have a deep analysis performed on it without doing so. I'll be going through the movie and breaking it down using its own rules. The movie, much like any good magic trick, is broken up into three parts: the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. The movie starts out by introducing the audience to the steps of any good magic trick. It starts with the pledge. The pledge is where a magician shows you something ordinary. This object can be anything, and it usually isn't as ordinary as it seems. Michael Caine's cutter then demonstrates a magic trick for a small child, revealed to be Borden's daughter, and more or less sums up the ending of the movie right at the beginning. One brother will sacrifice their life for the trick, while the other will be reunited with the little girl. That's the simplest version of events. This is also juxtaposed with Jackman's Angier performing his new transported man. It all comes down to sacrifice. What would you sacrifice for a trick? For fame? For art? What would you sacrifice to be better, to win? Everything starts out ordinary. There's even a line narrated by Borden from his diary where he talks about how they were two men at the start of a great career, devoted to an illusion, who never intended to hurt anyone. The audience is initially led to believe he means Angier and himself, when it becomes obvious later Borden meant his identical brother and himself. The devoted to an illusion line gives it away. Borden and Angier come across this type of devotion again when going to a Chinese magician's show. They are tasked with finding the secret behind the goldfish bowl trick illusion. A feeble older man makes a goldfish bowl appear, as if from out of thin air. Borden spots it right away because he is already living the same lie. The older magician pretends to be feeble when in public, to deceive people as to how the trick is done. You have to live to trick. You have to sacrifice to make people scratch their heads. Borden describes sacrifice as the only way to escape. The movie discusses sacrifice often and drives the point home that Borden believes it is a necessity for the craft. The movie shows the Borden brothers, Alfred and Freddie, are each sacrificing half of their lives to live as one and perform the perfect trick. Angier later, in yelling at Olivia, even says he lives his act. Don't you see? And he has no idea how right he is at that moment. Angier makes sacrifices in his own way as well, but we'll save that discussion for the Prestige. These two keep going at each other, driven by a professional rivalry and a personal grudge. Angier blames Borden for his wife's death and Borden claims ignorance when questioned about which knot he tied. It does seem a bit silly to have Caine's cutter swing the axe in the scene where they are trying to rescue Angier's wife from the water tank when you have Batman and Wolverine standing right there instead. Anyways, this drives Angier even more so than before. He sabotages Borden's bullet catch trick and Borden loses 2 fingers in the process. It is ironic that the only time Borden has revealed his trick to anyone, with him revealing the trick to his wife Sarah earlier, that would be the trick to backfire on him. One could suggest that it subconsciously pushed him further into the veil of secrecy that he had already formed around himself. Borden then sabotages Angier in return and round they go. The second part described is the turn, where the magician makes the object do something extraordinary. This isn't enough though. The audience wants to be fooled. The turn for this movie comes when Borden performs his transported man trick. It is done with very little lead up and a character describes it perfectly in saying that it was over so quickly that the audience didn't have time to absorb it. Despite the briefness of it, Angier describes it as the most amazing magic trick I've ever seen. This is where rivalry becomes an obsession. This is what drives Angier to do whatever he can to beat Borden at his own game. Angier then develops his own version of Borden's trick called the New Transported Man. This is almost an exact copy of how Borden does his trick without Angier even realizing it. Angier employs a double to perform the new trick, but whereas Borden's double is someone he trusts and is as devoted as he is. Angier's double, Root, is not as dedicated to the art, to say the least. He is an out-of-work actor and a drunk who drives Angier crazy with his lack of professionalism. The power dynamic between the different sets of doubles is the opposite, with Angier's double even finding out how valuable he is to the trick and the amount of leverage he can wield. Angier also grows weary of having to share the spotlight and spending the prestige of the trick underneath the stage. He grows even more desperate as time goes on and he pushes Olivia, his new assistant/partner, away to go spy on Borden. He puts getting the better of Borden above everything. He has grown to care more about destroying Borden than the memory of his wife or his relationship with Olivia. He even comes close to a boundary he thought he wouldn't cross. Angier loses Olivia and in turn, is sabotaged by Borden yet again when she turns to hate Angier for sending her away so easily. In Angier's desperation, he acts rashly but gains the keyword he needs to decode Borden's stolen journal. Tesla. The journal has been the guiding tool that Angier has been using to explore Colorado and try to get Nikola Tesla to build him a machine, as he had done for Borden. He travels across an ocean and spends a fortune to try and compete on the same level. Angier eventually gets what he so surely wants, the machine. The initial tests don't seem to be working, but exact science is not an exact science. The moral being you don't always get what you want or what you intend to happen. Angier has what he wants, so why should he look any further? His ambition drives him to go back to London with his new trick, the real transported man. The final step is to resolve the trick, and that final part is called the prestige. This is the crux of the trick. The payoff and the resolution. Angier brings his trick to be shown to a magical talent agent. The agent watches the trick and is shocked at what he has just seen. Angier disappears in a flash of electricity and reappears behind him almost instantaneously. Real magic, he calls it. He tells Angier to dress it up a bit so the audience can still see it as an illusion instead of what it truly is. This always was a bit funny to me. While it is magic in the sense of it is not yet possible to instantaneously transport anyone via machine, it almost feels like the agent is calling anything he cannot explain magical, even if it were science. Angier says he will perform the trick 100 times, no more, no less. We see what happens when the trick is performed successfully. Electricity envelopes Angier, gliding over him as the noise builds, and suddenly he is gone in a flash. A few moments later, he appears in the upper balcony of the theaters. We have also been given a hint of how this trick works. From the fields of hats and Tesla's experiments, we know that a duplicate hat is transported away and one remains in place. We also know from the beginning of the movie that there is a water tank under the stage during the performance that Borden attends and sneaks backstage for. So is the original Angier transported away, or does the original stay in place while a duplicate is created and transported across the theater? This was something that affected me greatly upon my first viewing. I came to realize that either way, the original Angier was dead. He performs a test of the machine before his demonstration for Agent and Cutter. He places a gun next to the machine. Angier activates the machine and the lightning engulfs him. There's a flash of light and two Angiers are now there. One in the middle of the machine and one transported away. The one in the machine picks up the gun and shoots the other despite his quickly silenced protest. The first time he performs the trick after that, there is a water tank and trapdoor in place under the machine to dispose of his prestige material. If the original is transported or stays in place, it doesn't matter, as he puts it, no one cares about the man in the box. I had once toyed with the idea that it was random. That it was never a sure thing if the one standing in the machine was transported away or if they stayed in place. A flip of the coin. Drowning is a fear that many folks share, and as Cutter puts it later, is like agony. It is a horrible thing to willingly step into something that is going to kill a version of yourself just for magic or even to set up a trap. Once Angier tested the machine, he used the performances as a trap, waiting to be sprung when Borden sneaks backstage. Freddie Borden pays the price for his curiosity and is charged with murdering Angier. This was Angier's game all along. Angier has become a monster in his ambition and desire to beat Borden. Borden learns this just as the audience does. Just as Borden had tricked Angier with a journal meant to throw him off the trail, Angier does the same with Borden. Informing him that he knows he is being charged with his murder, even mocking him seemingly from beyond the grave. Angier, of course, drops the facade to come as rub it in Borden's face as Lord called low. He has shifted to become the antagonist from the supposed victim and protagonist. We've been following his journey more since he has mostly been an open book where we, the audience, were just as in the dark as he was about Borden's great deception. This change brings out more sympathy for Borden and anger at how callous and deceptive Angier has been not only to everyone else but to us as well. Once one of the Borden brothers hangs for Angier's murder, that anger is addressed by the other as he shoots Angier. Angier realizes far too late that the simplest solution was right. Alfred replies that it was simple, not easy. Half of a full life, and that sacrifice was the price of a good trick. Each man was willing to go to different lengths to achieve their goals. All of this is pointless if they don't bring back the man who disappears. It isn't enough for the audience, and so, just like the trick with the bird at the beginning, Alfred is reunited with his daughter and can live a full life with her. These two men made sacrifices in all the wrong ways. Borden sacrificed himself and Angier sacrificed others, but Borden isn't blameless here either. While the Bordens only meant to sacrifice themselves, they put the burden of this life he had chosen on the women they loved. Sarah was so torn between his inconsistent behavior and lifestyles that she hung herself out of grief and depression. Olivia left due to his apathy over Sarah's death and his ongoing rivalry. The people they brought into their lives didn't sign up to only be loved and given their attention half of the time. It took all those events for Alfred to admit it would never be enough for them. Angier sacrificed so many folks on his way to his final prestige. He sacrificed Olivia as well, and he sacrificed Cutter's trust. When the man who has been like a father to you through the movie turns on you, you know you've crossed a line. His selfishness and single-mindedness were his undoings. These two men were selfish men reaching for greatness. What is the cost of a great trick? The brilliance of any great trick is simplicity. The more simple the solution, the more folks will assume it is more complex than that. It has to be for it to make sense to them, because the simplest trick sometimes requires the greatest sacrifice. Last evening I re-released the first of only 2 film blog articles I've written to date containing the genius that was David Bowie. Whereas he was a vampiric creature of the night in Tony Scott's 1983 cinematic debut The Hunger, here he turns to the mythic and some would say deliberately covered up life of Croatian-born inventor Nikola Tesla, in what I would also argue is Christopher Nolan's second bona fide masterpiece for the ages. Away from Bowie and Tesla you have Bale and Jackman, and as a childish fan of magic since the forming of my first human memories, I revere and obsess over this film almost like no other. My almost list in this context grows by the hour, it seems. From David Copperfield as a kid through the BBC magical staple of Paul Daniels for 2 decades or more, and more recently, Darren Brown and David Blaine, magic holds a simple fascination that is explored so beautifully and simply in The Prestige. You want to know the secret, you know it's a trick, an illusion, yet your eyes and ears are clearly lying to you. Aren't they? A simple example, David Blaine holds a pack of 52 playing cards. He requests his guest to sign 1 card and replace in the deck without the magician seeing before throwing the entire contents of the pack of cards at a window, and yes, you've guessed it, 1 card is magically on the reverse of the window, and voila, it's the signed card. Ridiculous. Can't possibly happen. But the camera reveal shows that it indeed can, or can it, as the card is shown very definitely on the reverse side of the window. Here's the best part. Even if you know how any trick is performed, there's always the prestige, or from the very, very best, the outlandishly unexpected, even for a trick you've worked out and seen through. Thus is magic. Thus is the prestige, and 16 years on, it's a genuine masterpiece that will never age. My original review is reproduced in full below, and after my Opus blog article on the entire career of the London-born filmmaking genius I revere almost like no other, and yes, that list is growing longer by the cinematic day too. My third movie from Christopher Nolan, the first is Inception, which was mind-blowing to me, second is Memento, which is equally good, not to mention how many awards it got. So I went on to explore more of his work, an earlier work of him, The Prestige, that tells the story about the world of magicians. The Prestige focused on 2 magicians which are rivals, and while the story developed, they started to compete more fiercely and would take any actions to beat their opponent, stealing the trick and method to perform the magic. They even go great length, sacrificing many things of themselves, even at the expense of their loved ones. I think this movie, for me, is less interesting than Inception and Memento. The flow is not as engaging. But towards the end of the movie, at 1 hour 30-minute time point, things started to get more tense and exciting, the unexpected double, sacrificing their rights as a person for the sake of magic, and more interestingly is the unintended side effects of a teleportation machine. For me, it is this teleportation machine that made a wow point for this whole film. And as usual with Christopher Nolan's movie, it leave an open ending as so, did Angie or really died in the end? Seeing their acts and all those sacrifice they have done, it made me contemplate the meaning of this kind of competition. Does all these acts have meaning? And did it worth it? For me, I would rank The Prestige after Inception and Memento. I don't just read, I also watch a lot of movies. I just love stories, in all the different ways they're told. And I just got this movie bucket list poster with 100 movies must-see movies. I started with scratching off everything I've already seen. Today's movie, The Prestige from 2006, directed by Christopher Nolan. This is, in fact, one of my favorite movies on this top 100 list. It's a movie where 2 great magicians, Bale and Jackman, do their damnedest to outdo one another after an accident ended their friendship. They go beyond everything and everyone to be seen as the best, wrecking their personal lives and relationships along the way. On the surface, this movie is about rival magicians who want to be the greatest of all time. they trade off blows by one-upping each other in various ways. The showmanship is turned up a notch when they each dress up to sabotage each other's performances, even causing injuries to spectators. Things take a very impressive character turn when one magician sends his assistant to work for his rival to steal his secrets, only to have her fall in love and throw a wrench into the situation. Meanwhile, Nikola Tesla pops up in a beautiful introduction and amazing piece of film. The sequences involving one magician's arrival to the lair of Tesla is impressive just for its cinematography and photography. Tesla, played by music legend David Bowie, provides a sinister service and really pushes the bounds of science fiction in such a subtle way that most people failed to recognize this film as science fiction for it. Tesla introduces the engineer to his coils of electricity. Engineer begs for the machine to further help his theatrics, and after a lot of convincing he gets his wish. But it becomes a true sinister plot twist towards the end of the film, and is the knife in the back of the viewer who thinks he's got it all figured out, but I won't ruin the ending. The director is none other than Christopher Nolan, The Dark Knight, and while he's made other spectacular pieces of film, no one talks about how great this film really is on so many levels. Its execution is really subtle, if you give it time. Seriously, you have to allow this to melt into your psyche, as it can easily be written off due to length and lack of explosive action and typical script writing or twists and turns. There is also a dynamic of identity in this film that I won't discuss or dare spoil the twists that are so carefully plotted. The reason why this film is scary is not so much because it is rival magicians battling for the #1 spot, or the plot twists that involve the character Alfred Borden, Christian Bale. Borden's split personality really comes into the spotlight in The Prestige, or the reveal, which is foreshadowed throughout the whole film by Michael Caine. Some people might focus on this portion of the film and miss Engineer and Tesla's venture into the science fiction world, but we'll stick with why it's scary and not the plot structure. To consider psychology, a person so dedicated to his craft that he would risk life and limb is not scary. I recommend this film. I recommend it for more than just the obvious pairing of Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. I recommend it for more than seeing Scarlett Johansson's beautiful costumes, or Michael Caine's brilliant portrayal of Cutter. The reason I say that is because of the wrench that Nolan throws into the traditional fictional account with Tesla and the supernatural that plays up the ending of this film. All I can say is that it involves clones. That's even too much, but you'll see why I call this a science fiction film if you watch the film for what it is, and not just the sum of its overall parts. In conclusion, I loved this movie every time I watched it, and it's because you can't get bored in front of it. There is too much mind-boggling revelations. Finally, I couldn't really explain the genre of The Prestige. It walks the fine line between mystery, drama, suspense, and fantasy. With following, Memento, Insomnia, and the uncommonly smart blockbuster Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan has established himself as a filmmaker fascinated by the fluid, tricksy contingencies of memory, identity, narrative, and time, the way we depend on the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, and the little slips and dodges, ignorant or willed, that allow us to keep those stories straight, at least for a while. Selfhood emerges from these films as a rickety trick, an illusion dependent on misdirection and oversight. Apt, then, that the director's latest is a story about magicians. Nolan's first period picture, The Prestige, shares the fractured chronology common to his earlier work. Based in turn of the last century London, the plot centers on two ambitious young illusionists, flashy, easygoing Robert Engineer, Hugh Jackman, abetted, as in Batman Begins, by Michael Caine, and the more original but less extrovert Alfred Borden, Christian Bale. Fellow apprentices turned bitter rivals after a grisly on-stage accident, their escalating feud is a game of cat and mouse played out in a hall of mirrors, set in cramped prison cells and Colorado expanses as well as theaters, as they compete to deliver the most spectacular version of a teleportation trick that calls for something like real magic. Jackman and Bale make impressive tango partners, neither wholly sympathetic nor villainous, each drawing out the synergy between his character's personality and his onstage style. It's a handsome film, too, beautifully photographed by Wally Pfister in a chocolate and cinnamon sepia palette flashed with electric blue. But the Prestige languishes in a structural catch-22 of its own making. Explicitly modeled on the pattern of a magic trick, it's also bound to the rules of the mystery thriller genre, yet the one relies on lingering uncertainty, the other on full disclosure. And in devoting so much room to hollow romantic subplots, the film ends up breaking two of the magician's cardinal rules. Not only does it tell you how it's all done, it takes so long about it that you've got time to look up its sleeves and work it out for yourself. I've decided that I hate magicians. I hate their personalities, on-stage personas, outfits, quasi-dance moves and tricks. I hate the fact that in reality they are performance artists, and lousy ones at that, and that no matter how grand their magic is, there is always a predictable resolution, a finale, the Prestige. Despite this inner, and now outward, angst, however, it should be stated that I very much took a liking to Neil Burger's The Illusionist, 2006, when my mate picked it as his choice in our regular Monday movie night. It is, after all, for mostly a love story and a murder mystery, told with care and precision and featuring exquisite performances from a talented cast including Edward Norton, Paul Giamatti, and the lovely Jessica Biel. From beginning to end I was captivated and intrigued, trying to solve the puzzle in my head even when it appeared there wasn't one to be solved. As a magician hater, it would be hard for me to again be impressed by a movie dealing with the same subject, but then I watched The Prestige. Pitting two performers with a mutual, devastating hate against each other as they strive for the perfect trick, Christopher Nolan's highly regarded grand opus has garnered such a loyal following it's a wonder it hasn't knocked off The Shawshank Redemption / The Godfather Part 2 as the #1 ranked movie on IMDb. It's actually quite surprising that a film with no redeemable characters whatsoever has become so popular and so extraordinarily rewatched. Normally it's charisma and charm that ensure a second, third, or 50th visit to a particular film, but here, as with other titles such as The Usual Suspects, Mulholland Drive, and The Shining, it is the complexity of the plot that keeps people coming back. There is almost a rule when having watched The Prestige, that you must show it to someone who, if not unfamiliar with it, must at least be ignorant of its story, in order to discuss the revelation and its evidence throughout the running time afterwards and garner an even stronger appreciation for what Nolan created. While I don't believe this to be his best film, that honor still lies with the twisty Memento. Any lover of his Batman trilogy has the duty of witnessing what can be achieved on a smaller scale. To quote David Cronenberg in his reaction to The Dark Knight Rises, I think it's still Batman running around in a stupid cape. I just don't think it's elevated. Christopher Nolan's best movie is Memento, and that is an interesting movie. I don't think his Batman movies are half as interesting, though they're 20 million times the expense. I'm nowhere near this harsh, but you get the point. The Prestige has a grand aura that harkens back Hollywood's golden age. It provides mature entertainment without the need for an R rating, and assembles a cast that covers all tastes. Hugh Jackman can sell films to nigh every Australian. Christian Bale and Michael Caine have worked hard to forge incredible reputations as dramatic actors. Scarlett Johansson is simply stunning and sizzles on screen, and supporting players such as Andy Serkis, David Bowie and Piper Perabo have cult audiences that would follow them all the way to a Home Alone sequel and back. I hate magicians. Hate them like I hate pineapple on pizza and uncomfortable cinema seats. But it needs to be said, I love The Prestige. It's not a perfect film. The second act stands mainly as an hour of time devoted to watching two enemies come up with increasingly nasty ways to ruin each other's reputation, and there can only be so many times that they pick each other out of their respective crowds to assist in the performances before it becomes terribly silly. But for 130 minutes it forces its audience to suspend disbelief and jump headfirst into a labyrinth more difficult to navigate than the mind of Carlos Estevez. The Prestige is about two magicians in 19th century England whose friendship turns into a lifelong rivalry as they go to any and all lengths in order to one-up each other on their quest to create the ultimate illusion, something that would make that David Blaine weirdo run for the hills with his tail between his legs. Who knew people took magic so seriously? So for some reason, this movie came out at the same time as The Illusionist, also about a magician doing his thing in 19th century England, and I find that people constantly mistake the two. But make no mistake folks, The Prestige is the one to see. It's directed by Christopher Nolan, and, really, what else is there to say? He's one of the best at what he does, and it's been crystal for a while now that he's got this whole storytelling thing down to a science. And while the look and feel of this movie is very sleek and stylish in keeping with Nolan's prior and future efforts, the most impressive thing about this movie is the way in which he structures it. And on that note, here's the story behind the title actually, rather than paraphrase it myself and butcher it like I know I will, I'll let Michael Caine do the talking. Take it away, Mike. Every great magic trick consists of 3 parts or acts. The first part is called the pledge. The magician shows you something ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird, or a man. He shows you this object. Perhaps he asks you to inspect it to see if it is indeed real, unaltered, normal. But of course, it probably isn't. The second act is called the turn. The magician takes the ordinary something and makes it do something extraordinary. Now you're looking for the secret, but you won't find it, because of course you're not really looking. You don't really want to know. You want to be fooled. But you wouldn't clap yet. Because making something disappear isn't enough, you have to bring it back. That's why every magic trick has a third act, the hardest part, the part we call the prestige. The reason I bring this up because Nolan structures the plot as though it were a magic trick. He starts off by presenting the audience with ordinary characters in an otherwise ordinary situation, develops them and their trade into extraordinary subjects, and then brings it all full circle with the final prestige at the end. Can't really say more than that, but it's a thing of beauty. Man, it's gotta be tough as all hell to write a script like this, even an adapted script, but Chris Nolan and his brother Jonathan pull it off like it's no big thing. I don't know how they do it, but keep it up, guys. The acting here is also really solid. Christian Bale plays the closest thing we have to a good magician, and Hugh Jackman takes on the closest thing we have to an evil magician. The reason I say this is because they're both pretty mean bastards at one point or another, and even though their roles seem to become much more defined by the story's close, I don't think these two guys have too many friends. But still, this is Patrick Bateman and Wolverine we're talking about here. Good acting as usual on their behalves. And my man Michael Caine plays the mentor/voice of reason to our two favorite magicians as their hobby develops into obsession. Since Michael Caine is freaking great and is probably up there as one of my all-time favorite actors, I'll just say that he kicks ass as usual and leave it at that. Scarlett Johansson's also in it as Jackman's assistant. She's fine. Oh, and David Bowie's in it too as Nikolai Tesla. Not much of an actor, but then again, David Bowie rules. The point is, The Prestige is an absolutely wild movie that will amaze you the first time around and then make you want to watch it all over again right after. The characters can be a little too cold for their own good at times, but hey, we're talking about 19th century magic here, this shit is no joke. It's Chris Nolan, it's an all-star cast, it's a totally boss script, and hats off to you if you figure it all out before the end comes around, because I sure as hell didn't. Christopher Nolan's own Prestige takes a knock with this fantastically boring and self-important movie about two stage magicians in Edwardian London, starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. There's a reliably eccentric cameo from David Bowie, playing the maverick inventor Nikola Tesla, investigating the magic of electricity in his secret lair, surrounded by what looks like a couple of dozen giant-sized Van de Graaff generators, all zapping unsafely away and looking like they might at any moment incinerate Bowie's splendidly contoured mustache. Scarlett Johansson plays an unfeasibly sexy magician's assistant with a Cockney accent that makes her sound like Martine McCutcheon's Canadian cousin. Jackman and Bale play Angier and Borden, two magicians consumed with fanatical rivalry and hatred. Jackman is the debonair stylist addicted to applause, Bale is the pugnacious white boy with the genuine vocation for magic. Michael Caine is landed with the supremely dull role of the ingenieur, the backroom boffin who has to listen to, and deliver, explanatory speeches. Prestige, a magician's technical term invented by author Christopher Priest for his original 1995 novel, means the crowning moment of a trick. It's the gasp-inducing climactic flourish, the moment whose devastating impact has to be guarded as closely as possible before detonation. So it is odd that the prestige of this film, the trick ending, is gradually given away over the final 40 or so minutes in a series of extended takes and giveaway close-ups. Why? Because the director figured we were going to guess anyway? Christopher Nolan is not striving for his own narrative conjuring trick in the style of M. Night Shyamalan or David Mamet. Nor is he in the business of deconstructing the tricks of the magician's trade. A little exasperatingly, he declines to reveal how a young woman can be magicked out of a tank of water and be completely dry with not a hair out of place. The drama is supposed to reside more in the human battle, the deadly duel between these two illusionists, and the disturbing suspicion that Engiers has made a Faustian bargain with Tesla to create some genuine occult magic on the frontiers of what is scientifically thinkable. How startlingly dull it all is. The vital elements of wit, of insolence, of light-footedness and lightheadedness that make magic so compelling, and incidentally, also made Christopher Nolan's first two films so compelling, are all neglected in favor of a desperately humorless and unsmilingly acted contest, with borrowings from David Cronenberg. Unexpectedly, the frisson of interest is from Bowie, who, with his patina of strangeness and awkward reticence, almost ventriloquizing his lines from a near immobile face, does indeed seem like a man with a hint of craziness, or genius. The movie's opening and closing images are of a hillside covered, surreally, in top hats. There are no rabbits to be pulled from any of them. Christopher Nolan is not the type of filmmaker to make directly introspective works. His films are plot machines, theme factories, set-piece engines. They are skyscrapers, huge and gleaming. But even skyscrapers have an architect who poured their soul into the design, and so several Nolan films can feel personal despite their grand cinematic ambitions. The Prestige is the story of two competing magicians who sacrifice themselves in different, but mirrored ways. Both are obsessed creators who can only achieve their vision by conquering the impossible. Both find a way, but only at great loss of the self. Through this, Nolan pays scathing tribute to his perfectionist muse. What he creates costs him his soul, but the result is true magic. In many ways, it's Nolan's Mulholland Drive, part angry screed against the soul-sucking Hollywood machine, part recognition of its all-consuming power. In short, there will never be a more self-reflective film in Nolan's canon than The Prestige. Above all other concerns, The Prestige is a terrific and gripping piece of storytelling, though. Through a fractured timeline we see Robert Engier, Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, Christian Bale, become nemesis after Borden screws up a magic trick that results in the death of Engier's wife. They each develop tricks the other cannot decode, each finds success but devastating personal loss. The film opens near the end of the nonlinear timeline with the death of Engier, plunging into a tank and drowning, with Borden taking the blame for the murder despite apparently having nothing to do with it. And thus Borden is sentenced to death, the escalating feud reaching its apex, a death traded for a death. The movie then hops back in time to show us how we got there. This framing device sets up a terrific series of connected dualities between the two magicians, failures and successes and fixations that all provide breadcrumbs for one of the most narratively satisfying conclusions to any film you'll ever watch. It's the best possible version of a puzzle box story. The clues really were right in front of us and really do point to paradigm-shifting surprises. Almost like a magic trick. To quote my good friend and podcast co-host Brian, who declared it his number 3 favorite movie of all time back in 2013, perhaps strangest and most poignant of all is that Borden and Engier, despite the film opening with their deaths, both ultimately achieve their own kind of immortality as they each invent the perfect trick as a result of their tireless work, but, for each, It comes at a cost they do not willingly pay. I believe this is what Nolan sees when he looks in the mirror, a creator who lost some of himself, but made art that will be cherished forevermore. His own story ties to Borden and Angier in different ways, both heroic and villainous, both self-destructive as they search for the soul in their art. There's a lot to love in The Prestige. In addition to the self-destructive creator concept, some smaller themes get dissection, like the intersection between science and entertainment, and acts of deception as expressions of love, and a handful of others. It's a rich film, as thoughtful as it is entertaining. With the loaded cast it has, Bale, Jackman, Michael Caine, Scarlett Johansson, and more, it's little surprise that the acting is fantastic. Bale in particular channels a hungry artist willing to stop at nothing to climb the summit. Jackman and Caine are more so playing themselves, but well, while Johansson doesn't leave a huge impression relative to some of her other performances, The Prestige is an easy-to-film to look at, too. As with all Nolan works, the production is superior, with some great steampunk-esque period details and a tactile representation of 1890s London. In fact, that might be the secret ingredient that makes the whole thing work, the immersive, cobbled-together, gas-lamp-lit Victorian look by production designer Nathan Crowley and cinematographer Wally Pfister, two regular Nolan collaborators. I ultimately rank The Prestige just a hair below The Dark Knight among Nolan's filmography, in part because I think Nolan does operatic myth-building better than introspection. As personal a piece as this is, I would never go so far as to call it an intimate film. In other directorial hands, some smallness and quietness could have deepened the film's emotional impact. But Nolan, as mentioned, is a skyscraper architect. Smallness is not in his toolkit. The Prestige is pretty damn close to a masterpiece, a sublime story that rewards careful observation. Are you watching closely? Here at Cine Outsider, reviewers don't skimp on detail unless they have to sit through the unspeakable awful shark tale. But this will deliberately be a capsule review of a movie that is almost impossible to review without actually talking about the film, hence my, forgive the word invention, capsularity. If I talk about the film I will reveal things, and having things revealed is not how you want to approach The Prestige. It is a magician's act of a movie and a tremendous example of a film that suffers the more you know about it. But does it? If you dip into and taste the wonderfully bizarre theories cast by IMDb posters, after you have seen it, please, the film also demands repeated viewings to unravel multiple interpretations. There seems to be a hinge at the point of the viewer accepting a genre change in the last act, or seeing that hinge too as an illusion. I can say no more except see the movie. You'll be talking about it long after the credits have verticaled north. In fact, as I drove home, I was bombarded by a number of "oh, if that was the case then he had to." And "but if he had to do that then that meant that." Not many movies plant that many post-timed thought grenades in your skull, all highly welcome. The talented director, Christopher Nolan, spans genres and filmmaking scale, from Memento to Batman Begins, and has an unusual predilection for time-fractured drama. Memento was a tale told backwards and very successfully so. The Prestige is a tale told in many timelines, but it is a supreme compliment to the director's skill that the various temporal strands in which his tale is unraveled are crystal clear. I bet there were a few nervous execs that felt that a subtitle or two might have helped, but all credit to the filmmakers. In fact, even linearly told stories could benefit from this much clarity. Two friends, both magicians' aides in the late 1800s, vow to become magicians themselves. One, Rupert Angier, played charmingly by ex-blade-fingered Hugh Jackman, is smooth, happily married and a natural-born showman. He's the one of the two who sees the world and what the world wants to see very clearly. But if he lacks anything, it is the intellectual rigor that the success of his job requires. Fulfilling that task is Michael Caine's cutter, the Jonathan Creek, if you will, the illusion builder. It's his explanation of the title that opens the movie. There are three parts to a magician's trick. The first, the pledge, shows you something ordinary that probably isn't. The turn is the act of magic itself, the disappearance, the drowning lady, the extraordinary act. The prestige is the result, the effect on the audience and the resulting awe. The second magician, Alfred Borden, played by Christian Bale, is the more secretive, the more closed and definitely more cockney. It becomes clear to anyone with a brain that Borden's secret is, as sight and sound said, insultingly obvious. But that's part of the magic, if you will. That very act of smug deduction is in itself the result of misdirection. Both men suffer horrific personal losses and both men wage war on each other via personal assaults, during performances, and the revelations of diaries stolen by each and read by both as the movie progresses. In The Prestige, we are asked to believe that two men would go to the very limits of human behavior to earn, or deceive to earn, that prestige. It is a tale about obsession and it all starts after a terrible accident, or was it an accident? Seriously, this is a movie that revels in its twists and turns, and if you delight in cinema as a puzzle, you will devour The Prestige and love every throat contraction as it goes down. The Prestige is a 2006 mystery drama film directed by Christopher Nolan and based on the 1995 novel of the same name by Christopher Priest. The film is known for its intricate and non-linear narrative, as well as its exploration of themes related to magic, obsession, rivalry, and sacrifice. The film is set in the late 19th century and revolves around the competitive relationship between two magicians, Robert Angier, played by Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, played by Christian Bale. The story unfolds through multiple timelines and perspectives, as it explores the lengths to which these two magicians are willing to go to outdo each other in their quest for the ultimate magic trick, the prestige. As the rivalry escalates, it becomes increasingly dark and personal, leading to a series of shocking revelations and twists that challenge the boundaries between illusion and reality. The film also features Michael Caine as Cutter, a mentor to the two magicians, and Scarlett Johansson as Olivia, a woman caught between them. The Prestige is known for its complex narrative structure, which keeps viewers engaged and guessing throughout the film. It explores the ethics of magic, the sacrifices made for the sake of artistry and fame, and the blurred line between deception and reality. The title Prestige refers to the final and most important part of a magic trick, where the magician makes the object or person disappear or reappear, often with a dramatic flourish. The film received critical acclaim for its performances, direction, and storytelling. It's considered one of Christopher Nolan's finest works and has gained a dedicated following among fans of mystery and psychological drama. If you enjoy intricate, thought-provoking films with a touch of the supernatural, The Prestige is definitely worth watching. Set in London during the late 19th century, The Prestige tells the story of two aspiring magicians, Robert Angier, played by Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, played by Christian Bale. The film begins with a tragic accident during a magic trick, which sets the stage for the intense rivalry between the two men. Angier and Borden start as friends and colleagues working for a magician named Cutter, played by Michael Caine. They perform together as a team until a dangerous trick goes horribly wrong, resulting in the death of Angier's wife. This incident marks the beginning of their bitter feud. The rivalry between Angier and Borden escalates as they both seek to become the greatest magicians in the world. They constantly try to outdo each other with increasingly complex and dangerous tricks. This competition takes a personal toll on both of them, affecting their personal lives and relationships. One of the central elements of the film is the invention of a mysterious and seemingly impossible magic trick called the Transported Man. Borden creates this trick, which allows him to instantly teleport from one side of the stage to the other. The trick baffles audiences and magicians alike, including Angier. Angier becomes obsessed with discovering Borden's secret behind the Transported Man. He goes to great lengths, including espionage and sabotage, to uncover the secret. In the process, he recruits an engineer named Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie, to build a device that will help him replicate Borden's trick. As the rivalry intensifies, both Angier and Borden resort to extreme measures, including sacrificing their personal relationships and ethical boundaries. The film explores themes of obsession, sacrifice, and the cost of greatness in the pursuit of their craft. The Prestige is structured with a nonlinear narrative, weaving together multiple timelines and perspectives to keep the audience engaged and guessing. The film's title, Prestige, refers to the final and most significant part of a magic trick, where the magician makes something extraordinary happen. In this context, the film's title symbolizes the ultimate goal of both magicians to achieve the extraordinary and become the best in their field. The film's climax reveals the shocking truth behind the secrets of the transported man and the lengths to which Angier and Borden were willing to go to achieve their respective prestiges. The film's final twist leaves the audience questioning the blurred line between illusion and reality, as well as the moral and personal consequences of their actions. The Prestige is a complex and thought-provoking film that explores the dark and obsessive world of magic and the consequences of an all-consuming rivalry. It's a tale of sacrifice, deception, and the high price of perfection in the world of illusion. The Prestige is a cinematic masterpiece that combines elements of mystery, drama, and psychological thriller to deliver a mesmerizing and thought-provoking experience. Directed by Christopher Nolan, the film showcases his trademark narrative complexity and visual storytelling prowess. Like Prospero in Shakespeare's The Tempest, the Nolan brothers deliver a masterfully deceptive illusion in their 2006 film The Prestige. The film is an epic examination and meta-commentary on the art of filmmaking, as all framing and misdirection. Are we paying attention? All the mysteries in The Prestige are in fact hiding in plain sight. Very loosely based on a 1995 novel of the same name by Christopher Priest, the film is told in fragmented, anti-chronological order, not unlike other Christopher Nolan films Memento or Dunkirk. The Prestige was made in between Nolan's classic Batman movies, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Ostensibly, The Prestige is about two rival magicians in late 19th century London who battle one another in competition to perform a greater illusion. One is Robert Angier, Hugh Jackman, a man obsessed with the idea of real magic and unsatisfied with ordinary or unimpressive explanations of trickery. However, as with all other things in this film, people are not truly as they seem. In truth, we later learn Angier is actually named Lord Caldlow, a wealthy aristocrat. He assumes the persona of Angier along with his wife and pairs up with Alfred Borden, Christian Bale, a lower-class realist who is obsessed with the methods employed by magicians as well as the lengths they go in order to protect the secrets, most notably in the case of a Chinese magician who feigns being crippled in order to maintain his ruse, making a fishbowl appear seemingly out of nowhere. Borden's diary entry says the two men were never trying to harm anyone, though we later learn he was referring to someone else. At any rate, Angier and Borden agree to perform a series of magic shows under the direction of an old-time stage magician and engineer John Cutter, Michael Caine. In my view, Cutter is the most important character in the film, not least of which because his very name Cutter is an allusion to the film editing process, but also he is the chief narrator of The Prestige with his commentary bookending the movie. He introduces us to the notion of misdirection and the three-act magic trick. 1. The pledge, in which the magician shows us something ordinary. 2. The turn, in which the magician takes something ordinary and transforms it into something extraordinary. 3. The prestige, in which the magician returns the audience to a feeling of normalcy but still leaves us with a sense of awe as the natural order has been suspended, or at least we have been tricked. Does the prestige itself also follow this three-act formula? If so, the pledge occurs at the outset. We see clever magic tricks such as a disappearing bird, even though Borden's daughter clearly lays out the plot of the film when she asks where the brother went. Is one brother sacrificed for the sake of the trick? Angier is killed in an apparent performance gone wrong and Borden is blamed. Then in a series of disjointed flashbacks and unreliable journal entries, we learn that Angier's wife was once killed in a drowning accident while they were performing on stage. Was it deliberate? What was Cutter's involvement? Distraught, Angier and Borden part ways in separate magic acts, with both sabotaging each other amidst escalating performances. Angier becomes the Great Danton, perhaps an allusion to the infamous French aristocrat during the French Revolution, and he offers a more polished overall presentation, while Borden becomes the professor who performs a less refined show which includes a masterful trick entitled The Transported Man. This leads us to the turn. The Transported Man trick involves Borden seemingly teleporting himself across the stage from one doorway to another in a matter of seconds. He and his assistant Fallon are widely celebrated for the show, though Cutter seems unimpressed. This is the trick that drives the rest of the plot forward as Angier goes mad and desperately tries to uncover its secret. Cutter claims the trick is merely performed with a body double, but Angier believes some dangerous new science might be at work. Cutter and Angier decide to copy the trick, so Cutter locates a doppelganger, a cynical drunkard named Gerald Root. However, after Angier sends his attractive assistant Olivia, Scarlett Johansson, to Borden in the hopes of discovering his secret, but he is betrayed by both Olivia and Root. Olivia presents Angier with a questionable journal written in code by Borden. This leads him to kidnap Borden's assistant Fallon in an effort to gain the secret to the trick, but all he gets is one word: Tesla. As revealed in a questionable journal entry, Angier says he traveled to Colorado and met with Nikola Tesla, who constructed a cloning machine before being run out of town by Thomas Edison's men. The rivalry between Edison and Tesla provides an intriguing backdrop to the story. Tesla leaves behind a note warning Angier against using the trick. Lastly comes the prestige. Borden's relationship with his wife falls apart under confusing circumstances and she kills herself, while Angier arrives back in London to perform his new trick using Tesla's cloning machine. He begins performing a string of 100 shows in which he is seemingly both killing himself and cloning himself at each show, with a body dropping into an enclosed vat of water. Thus we return to the beginning of the film. Borden, facing execution in prison, agrees to give custody of his daughter to an older wealthy gentleman in exchange for his secret to the Transported Man. However, the gentleman is soon revealed to be Lord Caldlow, otherwise known as Angier. He apparently intends to claim Borden's daughter and the life that was once taken away from him. However, the real twist comes when Cutter discovers the truth and apparently betrays Caldlow. Borden, the real Borden, meets Caldlow in his warehouse where his water enclosures are stored and promptly shoots him. It is revealed that Cutter was right all along. Borden had a twin, and that was the secret to the Transported Man trick. With his dying breath, Caldlow admits there is no real magic and the world is solid through and through. The audience knows the truth. The world is simple, miserable, but he begs Borden to look around him at the room. Borden declines and simply walks away to once again be reunited with his daughter, alongside Cutter. So what really happened in this movie? Are we paying close attention? In the war between credulity and realism, realism wins. There are people who want to believe in things like miracles and spectacles, but they are ultimately at the mercy of incredulous magicians. A surface-level reading of the film would suggest Angier/Caldlow was truly able to clone himself using a newfangled scientific device. However, in truth we never truly witness the device in action. The only such instance that comes close is a notable scene in which Angier sees his double and quickly shoots him. However, this is all revealed in a highly dubious journal entry written by Angier directly to Borden to convince him of its veracity. Otherwise we see the art of misdirection masterfully employed. Are we paying attention? The hats and cats laid outside Tesla's studio were likely placed there for Angier's benefit, if he indeed did make such a trip to Colorado. The cloning device did not in fact use real clones at all, but rather it is possible that Angier simply reintroduced Root, the look-alike from his earlier performance of The Transported Man. The one exception is saved for when Borden ventures backstage. In this case, Angier's double is dropped into a locked case of water which kills him, hence why he appears so disoriented. Thus preserving the ruse and also allowing Angier to exact vengeance on both Root, who betrayed him, and Borden, who killed his wife. The vat of water serves as a kind of poetic justice. However, the one thing he does not suspect is that Borden has a misbehaving twin. True to form, Angier maintains total devotion to his art by having each container filled with wire carted away to a warehouse after each performance and, according to the theory, each container is filled with a wax figure of himself. A man with unlimited financial resources would have no problem concocting such an elaborate ploy. However, Borden's ploy was even more elaborate because it included concealing his identity from his own wife and necessitated switching personas with his twin brother to preserve the integrity of his prized trick. Lastly, there are many other characters worth examining in this film, such as the odd relationship between Nikola Tesla, David Bowie, and his assistant, Andy Serkis, contrasted with the magicians and their assistants. Who is Tesla and how does he swindle Angier out of his money? He appears only briefly in the midst of financial losses engulfing his rivalry with Edison. Much like the rivalry between Angier and Borden, Tesla and Edison are also trying to copy and sabotage each other. Notably, we never get to hear the true contents of the letter Tesla leaves for Angier, perhaps because there was no letter and the Tesla interlude was merely used as an alluring misdirection. At any rate, the most elusive character in the film for me is Cutter. He frames the entire narrative for us. Is he villainous? He quite obviously helps each magician kill each other's double. Is Cutter party to the plot along with Borden to steal Angier/Caldlow's money, hence why he does not appear surprised to see Borden at the end? After all, he encourages them to get their hands dirty. In the endless battle between Angier and Borden, Cutter always appears to be a neutral person, an omniscient figure with his own motives. We are led to view him as a warm, inviting, fatherly character, and perhaps this why we should be most skeptical of him. Are we paying attention? Or in the words of Cutter, the neutral editor and the brains behind the project, now you're looking for the secret. But you won't find it because of course, you're not really looking. You don't really want to work it out. You want to be fooled. This film, directed by Christopher Nolan, screenplay by Jonathan Nolan, based on The Prestige, produced by Emma Thomas, starring Hugh Jackman, cinematography Wally Pfister, edited by Lee Smith, music by David Julian, production companies Newmarket Films, distributed by Buena Vista Pictures Distribution, release dates October 17, 2006. Running time 130 minutes. Countries United Kingdom. Language English. Budget $40 million. Box office $109 million.